Naibe, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you on this side of the mic. I was a guest on your podcast and it was an honor to be there. So I'm excited to not only return the favor, but get to know more of your story and introduce it to our listeners.
I'm excited to be here. I listen to your podcast. So yay.
I love it. All right. Let's start off with an intro. So we have all our guests kind of give us a brief rundown of who they are, and then we'll dive into your backstory.
Sure. So I'm a proud Mexican-American born here in Los Angeles, California. My parents are from a little town in Mexico. And I started a career in journalism right out of UCLA back in 1995. I've been a career journalist. I've won multiple Emmys. I've worked for various networks. And then I decided later in life, in my mid-40s, to branch out and start two different businesses, Con Todo Press, which is a publishing company, and Latina Fest, which is an event that happens every year. And we have other events that coincide with Latina Fest throughout the year, but the flagship one is once a year. And I'm a mom and I have two children and two dogs.
Okay, so you're what I like to call a multi-hyphenate, which there's a lot of people that listen to this show that want to have maybe multiple identities. You know, they want to be a rental property owner. They want to have a career. Maybe they want to have a side hustle. And so I want to know, let's kind of go back in history. Mm-hmm. You said you studied journalism. What was your initial dream around that? If you're like a first-gen kid, most of the time we're like, doctor, lawyer, engineer, you got three choices. So how did you end up in journalism?
Well, actually, when I was at UCLA, I didn't know what I wanted to be at all. I mean, my dad had multiple jobs in gardening, car salesman, picking fruit, etc. He did actually end up opening a restaurant, a small little restaurant, etc. And my mom was a seamstress and she worked at a factory, at a sweatshop. So around me, those were like the role models, my immediate role models. And I'm first generation, as you mentioned. So I was kind of like, what are my options? At UCLA, at the time that I went there in the 90s, there was not a broadcast or journalism major. So I just kind of opened the catalog of classes. Back then, it wasn't online. It was a paper catalog. And I just said, what do I want to be? I had no idea. So I started circling the different classes that caught my attention. And I gravitated towards sociology. So I actually graduated with the sociology degree, but it wasn't until my last year where I took a film class. I really was like, oh my God, I think I want to do something where you tell stories, right? And then I immediately hustled my way into an internship at Univision. And that's how my career started in journalism, because I kind of had that bravado to think outside of the box and say, okay, if I want to tell stories, maybe television is the way, maybe news is the way. And that's how I got my start.
Interesting. Okay. So it's funny because I feel like the storytelling realm has changed so much, especially with the onset of social media and even the internet. Everybody now has the theoretical potential of creating their own media company by starting a podcast or starting a YouTube channel and like creating their own lane, if you will. When you started, obviously that was not the case. So how did you break into the industry? Because that's something that can feel very daunting when you don't necessarily have any connections. Like, how the heck do I even get in this place?
Right. I think hustle will never go away, will never be out of style, right? So I literally knew nobody. I reached out to Telemundo. I reached out to Univision for an internship. Back in the day, it was old school where you actually call them. And yeah, they called me back. And I think the reason that I got that internship was because nobody else was doing that, right? Or maybe very few people. And they did need interns at the time. So that's how I broke in, by kind of just going for it and making that call. And I was at Univision for a whole summer as an intern. And then one of the producers started a newscast for a rival network in Los Angeles at the time, Channel 22, KWHY. And he brought me in as now a hired producer. When I was producing, there was other opportunities that arose. One of them was to produce and host a children's television show, which I did for 3 years here in LA, a Spanish language children's educational TV show. So I did that for 3 years. And then I kind of got tired of doing that. I wanted to explore more storytelling and not just entertaining, so to speak, even though we did teach and educational themes on that show. So I asked, again, I hustled and I asked the news director if he would give me an opportunity to do entertainment reporting. And then I did that for another 3 years. So it was basically me just asking.
What made you want to go into Spanish language media versus mainstream American media?
At the time, I felt like the Spanish language community would embrace me more. I was a little, to be honest with you, I was intimidated by knocking on the door of the English language media companies. I felt like, me, why would they hire, and that mindset is so wrong. Now that I think about it, I kind of look back at my young self and I go, oh my God, I wish I wouldn't have had that mindset back in the day, right? Why not me?
Right.
So I just felt the Latino community would take me in, and they did. So that's why I didn't even think about knocking on the door to English language. Eventually, I did end up working in English language stations, but not right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's amazing how some feelings of like maybe imposter syndrome or whatnot can be the thing that closes the door before anyone actually shuts it for us. I think it's important to recognize when you might be your own worst enemy in these situations. I'm like, who's telling me no? Is it me?
Right.
Or is it somebody else?
Right. And then also one tool that I've learned throughout the years is shifting that narrative, right? So for example, now what I thought was maybe a weakness, oh, this is a Latina, this is a girl that's bilingual. That was actually a strength. That would have been a strength for me to pitch to English language stations saying, look, I'm in LA, 50% of the community is Latino. I'm bilingual. I can do some really amazing stories because I could speak to your audience, right? But at the time, I didn't think of it that way. So it's all about shifting the narrative as well.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you're in your career, you're advancing. At what point do you realize, like, maybe I want to go off on my own?
Well, that didn't happen for years and years, right? Because I was a journalist from 1995 all the way to 2018.
Wow.
So that was over 25 years of me just kind of being a journalist. But as you mentioned, journalism and the landscape of media changed so much that jobs were getting cut. The competition was getting stiffer and stiffer because now we have YouTube to compete with, right? Now we have Instagram to compete with as far as media. So they were cutting jobs, and they were also, when you're in media and a woman, it's tough. They want the young, snatched, the new flavor of the month, so to speak. So it's kind of cyclical and you get cycled out. So I got tired of cycling out of the newsroom and then asking for more opportunities. And I just kind of hit that moment where I'm like, I am so tired of asking for permission, of asking for opportunity. See, this is where the mindset change was implemented, right?
Yeah.
I have all of this experience. I have all this ganas. I have this passion. I have a perspective. I can create something on my own. And that's when I decided to just kind of, you know what? I'm not going to knock on any more doors. I'm so tired. I'm going to create my own opportunities. And that was when we started Latina Fest, which was the first company that I started with my co-founder, Bel Hernandez. That was in 2018. And that same year, I just went for it. And I also started my publishing company, which both of those align with journalism, because obviously for the publishing company, I'm a reporter, I write. And that's what my publishing company does, right? We write books and we acquire books from authors. And for Latina Fest, it's a platform where we amplify the voices of Latinas. And that's what I always aim to do as a journalist, to amplify the stories of my community.
I love that. Okay, so I think it does take a certain level of courage to step out there and realize, like, maybe the best environment that I will thrive in is the one that I create for myself. And then I think immediately after you come to that realization, you're like, well, who the hell am I to be doing this?
Right.
So can you talk us through what that initial journey was like for you in founding these two companies, and maybe any like mental blocks that you had to move past in order to make things come to fruition?
By the time I was ready, I mean, I was already in my mid 40s. I'm 50 and proud.
Love it.
I'm 50 and proud. I just turned 50 this year. So it was kind of like a mid-career change, and I just had no fear. I still don't have fear. And I think that's one of the beauties of aging, of wisdom, of experience, of really learning all the lessons that we learn along the way. So I have absolutely no fear. I don't. What am I going to be scared of? What's the worst that can happen? And I have always seen and always taken things as whatever you do, whatever ask you do, whatever new product you create, I don't view it as a risk. I view it as an experiment. I'm going to experiment and see how this experiment turns out. If it fails, I move on. If it is a success, then I replicate that product or that event or whatever it is, that business.
Yeah, I think that's a growth mindset, right? That is the mindset of the worst that could happen is that I have to go back to a regular job, which is most people's regular existence anyway. So what are we actually really afraid of?
Right. It's kind of like right now that I own my own business, it's still work. I still, quote, have like bosses, meaning my customers. My
Right.
customers are my bosses now. It's not just
Yeah.
one person. And I love to answer to a whole group as a whole, my customers, or in the case of Latinafest, my attendees, right? What do they want? I'd love to answer to that wide group as opposed to one, and usually a man, right? To get their approval. Hey, I want to get a consensus. For example, in my books, when I release a new product and I see which books sell more, then I know, okay, my audience or my customers like this kind of style a little bit more. So you still have to answer to somebody. It's just not the one person that a lot of times, especially in media, think they're God.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so as a newly minted author, one of the really like eye-opening experiences of going through the publishing process was just how gate-kept and how like secretive this world is. So can you take us behind the scenes of what it looks like to actually create your own publishing company? Because I think that's such a novel thing, especially for a community where less than 10% of authors in general are Latina or Latino.
Right. Well, the gatekeeping aspect is exactly why I wanted to create my own publishing company. I did not even send my first book, Be Bold, Be Brave, 11 Latinas Who Made US History, to an agent or to a publishing company. I was so tired of knocking on doors and gatekeepers that I was like, I can't do this anymore. The way I created my own company is I did a LLC and then I did a DBA. So I did an LLC to kind of be an umbrella just in case I wanted to expand on my publishing company and maybe start creating content or other products that expanded beyond books. So that's why I did an LLC for my media company, so to speak. And then I did a DBA. So I'm just kind of really giving you the nuts and bolts. Mm-hmm. So I did called Con Todo Press. And then I just literally taught myself what are the first steps? And I got a coach. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is get yourself a coach. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, I've gotten a coach for fitness. I've gotten a coach for publishing. I've gotten a coach for business. I've gotten a coach for meditation and spirituality, and they have all paid off. And some of them, you need coaches for a season, and then you kind of learn the lesson and grow from it. Yeah. Some of them you kind of keep for a while. But anyway, going back to your question. So I learned from the coach that I hired and also from just like self-teaching myself. There's so many resources online. Amazon actually has a publishing school that's free. It's just literally online courses. It's just a checklist for publishing. It's like you get your barcode, you get your ISBN, you get your LCCN, CIP. And these little words are just like what those little fine prints that you see in books. Like that's what that is. It's the cataloging, right? Of when a librarian gets your book, that's called the LCCN, Library of Congress Control Number. So then after that, the next step, and I'm just literally going to give you the 1-minute version because it takes longer than that, obviously. So after you get all of that and you've written your manuscript, I definitely have someone, whether I write it or I get one from an author that I'm going to publish. I have a developmental editor look it through, and I hire them through Reeelz, which is, it's a marketplace for professionals in the field that do freelance gigs that have worked or sometimes still do work for the big 5 publishing companies. So they really know what they're talking about. They're experts in their field, and it's very, very reasonable. So then the copy editor kind of says, you know, what if the ending changes like this, or the middle is a little slow, or cut this out. So that's kind of the editing process. Then the copy editor, which dots my I's and crosses my T's and makes sure it's grammatically correct. After that, a book formatter, which gets the words. And then after I've hired my illustrator and they've done the illustrations, they put them together. And then I send it off to my printer in China, which I found on Alibaba.com. I'm giving you a lot of industry secrets here. But if you don't have the funds because printing hardcover or offset printing, as they call it in the industry, is really expensive. It's about, the cheapest is about $4,000 per book. And that's like if you're only going to print 1,000 copies. Wow. You can also do print on demand, through Amazon where you don't pay a dime for printing and they just print it for you. And then they print as the book is ordered. So that in a nutshell, in a 1-minute lesson of how to publish the book, that's how it's done.
That's incredible. So it sounds like you're just a naturally, I'm going to figure this shit out type of person, you know? And I think that's a very valuable asset to have, because that is how you level up. That is how you grow, right? That's how you refuse to stay stagnant, because you're just like, if I don't know this, I know there's someone out there that does. And it's a matter of doing the research and going after and finding it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. And the research is all out there. That's one of the beauties of the internet. It's there for your taking.
Amazing. Okay. So how do you now interface with authors? Do you guys basically like take them through the process of putting out their books? And so you're a full-on publishing house at this point.
Yeah, I have about 15 books and more on the way. I'm so excited for my new releases. When an author, there's 2 ways that I work with authors. One is they send me their manuscript and they're like, I want to get published. If I like it and it really resonates with me and I feel like aligns with my mission, then I will write a contract for them and I will publish them with the royalty, right? And then the other way is me coaching them. I'm also a coach, and I coach them on how they can self-publish. So those are the 2 ways that I work with authors.
That's amazing. I think we need so many more people in our community who are like helping folks enter these spaces where we might not have seen ourselves represented. It was really important to me in my own journey to have women of color as like the majority of my team, you know, from the editor to the photographer who did the cover image to my makeup artist. I was just like, that's the only people who are going to get the reason why this book needs to exist, right? And I feel like the more diversity that we have in these types of spaces, the less we can feel that we don't belong, because we all have important stories that need to be told. And there's a community that is hungry for those stories.
That's right. And I am so much against gatekeepers. Like for me, gatekeepers have kept our communities down for so long because they mystify success. They mystify the points of entry for industries, for television, for publishing, for beauty, you name it. And why should there be someone, this entity, this unknown entity, saying you're good enough, you're not good enough, you come in. It's like they're holding the little velvet rope in the VIP room to entry. And the people that enter the VIP room, guess what? They get the best life because they get the better jobs, they get the better opportunities. And Latinos were standing in line of that VIP line, waiting, clamoring, begging to get in. So I say, let's create our own VIP line. Let's open up those velvet ropes, because we are all VIPs.
I love that. That's such a great mindset. Okay. So talk me through your personal journey with like setting yourself up to be able to take on these opportunities, right? Because most of us do not have the luxury of just like quit the job and figure this out and hope that your business is successful. So what did you do in the background in order to like give yourself a runway to make this stuff possible?
It was kind of setting itself up on its own in a way. And I'll explain how. In media, when you're a reporter, a lot of times opportunities come as a freelance reporter, right? I did have some full-time jobs, but then after those started to dry up and the media landscape started to change, and a lot of my opportunities became freelance opportunities, meaning I don't have a full-time job. They're all mini, projects. Like I worked many projects. Exactly. Yeah. So that freed up my time a lot to, when someone didn't call me for a week to go work, then that freed up my time to start thinking like, I remember for a whole year, I was thirsty to start a company. Like, I was like, God, like, I'm not that religious. I'm not really religious, but I'm like, in this instance, I'm like, God, please. It's kind of like when you've been single forever and you're like, when am I going to find the one? I felt like that about a business. I wanted to start a business so bad. I was like, and you know what? I experimented with making churros. I experimented with making t-shirts. I just had that. So the little seed of like me starting a business was already planted. The little bing didn't happen, the aha moment, as they call it. Yeah. So when the political landscape got really, really harsh for Latinos, especially for Mexicans, when we were called rapists and gang members and criminals, specifically Mexicans, that's when the aha moment was like, you know what? I know what business I'm going to start. I'm going to start a business where I create books that tell a different narrative of our community, because I have a son, I have a daughter and a son, and I don't want my son as a Latino, as a Mexican American, thinking that he's those horrible words, right? So that was the aha moment. And because I was freelancing, that freed up my time to play around with publishing.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. We have to make space for what we want. For me, what that looked like was doing more remote work. You know, eliminating a commute was essential to me having enough capacity and space to like work on my business on the side until I was ready to take it full time. Let's talk about Latina Fest. So the origin story, what do you do? How do we get involved?
Okay. So Latina Fest, my co-founder, Belle Hernandez, her and I have very similar paths in the sense that she was an actress and she was also tired of the stereotypes, right? Of Latinos in movies. We're the gang members. We
gotta be the maids,
etc. So she became an activist and an advocate for Latina and Latino actors to get roles that were a little bit less stereotypical back in the 80s. So she started a magazine called Latin Heat, an industry magazine that just focused on Latino talent. As a matter of fact, Jennifer Lopez was her first front cover, and she actually interviewed her before Selena even came out.
Oh my gosh.
That's how far back her industry magazine went. So her and I ended up meeting years later, and we wanted to continue to amplify Latina stories. So we did a show called Let's Talk, where we would interview different Latinas and Latinos about whatever, entrepreneurs, actresses, etc. And then I said, why don't we, we have this show, but it's really, really hard to get a show, especially a talk show on mainstream media. It's like impossible. It's impossible. So we knew that was probably not going to happen, not because I don't have a growth mindset, but I also don't want to be delusional.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing
there's a fine line you have to walk.
So I said, why don't we create a festival where we replicate the show in a festival environment, and maybe we'll get more sponsors interested in the show to at least keep it afloat. So that's how it started, and it just blew up. And now the festival is what remained. So it's a celebration of all things Latina. It happens once a year. It's a day where Latinas are front and center. We are the ones being celebrated and highlighted, because many of us Latinas aren't ever celebrated, aren't ever highlighted. We're kind of like a secondary, or we do stuff behind the scenes but never get acknowledgement. So we wanted a platform where we have inspirational speakers, we have Latina entrepreneurs, we have Latina authors, we have Latina inspired fashion show, etc. So that's what Latinafest is. First one was in 2018, so we are going on 6 years, and it is a business. It's a legit business. It's an LLC. We filed the paperwork back in the day. We trademarked our logo, and it's been profitable since day one.
That's amazing. And so do you work with corporate sponsors at this point, or how is it funded?
We work with corporate sponsors, and we also have little booths where we sell to vendors, exhibitors, but mainly it's the corporate sponsors.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's nice to see corporate dollars being funneled into our community, because I feel like there's still a lot of disparity with regards to, especially like our themed events. I did an event in Puerto Rico last year, and it was impossible getting sponsors because, they're like, well, Puerto Rico's not part of the US. And I'm like, but what are you talking about? Wow. We're literally a territory of the United States. Like, I think there's still a lot of, well, do they really need this? Do we really need to be behind the Latino community? I'm just like, if y'all haven't realized the fact that the Latino community is the future economic engine of this country, y'all are going to be very much behind the 8 ball when that reality hits us.
Definitely. And when sponsors buy into themed festivals or Latino-centric festivals, it's they're putting their money where their mouth is, right? A commercial with a Latina person in it is not enough. I'm sorry.
No.
Because the only person that's getting paid is the Latina in the commercial. When we get paid, or when we get a sponsorship from a brand at Latinafest, we are also making sure that a lot of and most of our vendors and speakers and exhibitors get media coverage. We invite the media so they can get further amplified, because getting media coverage is also a struggle. We give them so many different resources, so many different opportunities. It's kind of telling our community, we actually do want to fund you. We want to share the wealth. We want to say thanks for buying our products and being a faithful consumer. So when we talk to sponsors, I'm very passionate about saying, like, we buy your products. Give back. It's time for you to give back.
Absolutely. All right. So you have an event coming up specifically geared towards Latina authors. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. So it's not our flagship Latinafest event. Our flagship Latinafest event happens next year in May. But we were like, how do we keep developing Latinafest where it's not just once a year? We keep our audience engaged. We keep the doors open for opportunities, et cetera. So because I'm an author and because I'm so passionate about the stories that we tell, and because we established an author's corner and an author's panel at Latinafest, I said, why don't we already have about 4 different types of events. So we established, this is the first annual Arte, Libros y Cultura, where we are going to have speakers that have written books like Sandra Velázquez from Nopalera, Linda Garcia, Wealth Warrior. She's going to be on a panel. Annette Chavez Macias, who wrote Big Chicas Don't Cry. And we're going to further amplify Olga Segura, who is actually a producer as well, and she's publishing her first children's book. So we just wanted to further amplify Latina authors and Latina voices, and also have a meeting space where fans can meet them, where fans can hear them speak, so we can kind of be in community. As you mentioned, Latina authors and our stories are vastly underrepresented. So I think we just need more like not passion. We have the passion. We just need more platforms in order to like market ourselves, et cetera. So
yeah, I think that's a very natural fit, especially given the fact that there will probably be aspiring authors that go to this event that then will find out about your publishing company and will potentially be part of the pipeline of new talent that gets put out there. So I'm so excited to see spaces like this being created, because when I was going through my own book publishing journey, I'm like, who the hell do I talk to? It's so much of just like, do you know somebody? Do you have a connection here? And so when we create these spaces that remove those barriers of intimidation, I think this is really where change begins to happen. So Naibe, I want to say, I am so excited for this event. I'm really wishing y'all so much success. And for folks that want to find out more about you, the work that you're doing, please let us know where we can find you.
Sure. I also wanted to add that at Arte, Libros y Cultura, which is on August 25th here in Los Angeles at Plaza de la Raza, we are going to have free workshops, free self-publishing workshops, free poetry workshops, free bilingual book activity workshops, free wealth learning workshops. So I just really wanted to put that out there. But that's happening August 25th. You can find out all about that at latinafest.com. Tickets are only $10. We would have made it free, but we have no sponsors this year. It's our first annual. It's a proof of concept this year. We have no sponsors. So if any brand is listening, please sponsor us. So it's only $10 and it's free for children. So that's for that. As far as where you can find Con Todo Press, contodopress.com. If you want to learn more about my coaching or about my books, contodopress.com. And on Instagram, it's also Con Todo Press, Facebook, Con Todo Press, Twitter, or X now. And my personal is just Naibe Reynoso.
Amazing. We'll make sure to include all of those links in the episode show notes, y'all. Make sure that you check out this event coming up August 25th. If you've ever wanted to write a book or just learn more about the process, be around movers and shakers in the publishing industry, this is where you need to be. Naibe, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Janice, thank you so much for being a trailblazer, for being a beacon of light in the ether of like Latinidad. You are like, there she is, Janice. There she is. Like, I go to you to get financial advice, to listen to your podcast. I learned a lot from some of your shows. So I also want to thank you for being a platform and an advocate and for doing everything that you do.
Thank you so much. And I like to say that we are strength in numbers. And so the more of us that show up for our community, the more impact we'll have and the more change we'll be able to see. So super excited to see that continue to manifest itself.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.